What's up? How y'all doing? It's Jared. This is a Defcon Jungle Knives Karambit. Sick knife right here. I really like this thing, but it's got some hokiness in branding. You might not realize the JK there above Jungle Knife doesn't actually stand for Jungle Knife. It stands for just kidding. Because when you think about something like a jungle knife, it's a Benchmade jungle clip point, something that you would actually want to maybe take out into the jungle. It's a Condor Kukurax. Maybe they're talking about, I don't know, Oakland, downtown Oakland or Chicago, something like that. This will be a little bit more fitting for that kind of jungle. I saw this thing in Weeby Knives sitting on the shelves, and it intrigued me, right? I didn't quite know what it was. There's a lot of karambits out there right now. There's a lot of, they've kind of gotten really popular on the market in the last couple years. There's a whole bunch of different companies making them, and this is not a new knife. This thing is actually not new to the market. It's been out for a few years. When I saw it in the store originally a few years ago, it just wasn't finished nearly as nice. The interior of the knife had milling marks and there was grind lines all over, and it just wasn't nearly as nice. You can see that they've actually skeletonized the frame a little bit to relieve some of the weight off that titanium. They've finished it excellently well. It's beautiful, right? For the price tag that you're going to be paying, it's got an MSRP of $200. A street price you're going to find it online is about $185, and for that, it's excellent, right? You got the marbled carbon fiber with that 3D milled that 3D mill pattern on there that just brings out the pattern and that actual carbon fiber. I freaking love it, as well as the overall finish of this thing on the handle. That anodizing has so many colors in it. I don't know if it's actually going to come across as well on camera here as it actually does in person, but there's yellows and there's blues and there's purples and there's all sorts of just beautiful colors coming out of this thing. But I had this for a while sitting here staring at it like, what is it about this thing that I actually do find so attractive, right? What is it about the design that really just called me, right? And I think what it is the combination of curved angles, curved lines, and straight angles. It's all exemplary on this blade. You see the spine of this blade, it's got these really heavy curved angles in combination with that, the actual curvature to form that hawkbill blade. It carries all the way through the knife. See, going down the spine, you've got these curved angles leading into these flat sections here, the curved angle leading into the flat section. It's the same thing on the back of the actual ring here. It creates that impact force multiplier. It's going to work really well. You smack somebody in the skull with that thing, but it's flat right there on the back, and it curves around, gives you a nice curvature. And so just the combination of lines in this thing, I think, is really what attracted my eye to it the most. Immediately. Not necessarily just the fact that it's purple and it's blue and it's brown and it's got all these crazy colors in it. It did come out of the box with the pocket clip actually on the reverse side of the knife. It came with the pocket clip on the back side of the knife. And if you are going to utilize this wave feature, you got to switch the pocket clip around so that it actually does come out of your pocket in the proper orientation, because the traditional grip of a karambit is in a reverse grip. And so if you do want to use this thing in a traditional or a reverse grip, and it's comfortable. It's definitely comfortable in both. They give you that option. I definitely like that. And I like the fact that they've actually included this little plate. It's blue, right? Which is, because the rest of the knife is that brownish color, right? And so the original here is you can actually get this thing in just kind of a stonewashed titanium color as well, instead of this kind of purplish blue or purplish brown that they've got going on here. And the blue actually makes more sense there. It's got a blue pivot. It's got a blue stopper, a blue pivot there, and this little thing here, which I just took out, is really cool. I kind of like this because it actually gives you the ability to deactivate the wave, right? So if you don't want this thing opening up every time you pull it in out of your pocket, you just leave this thing in there and it deactivates that wave feature, which is nice. That's a nice thing. You know what I mean? It's kind of a cool little design cue. I definitely like that. The blade length is 2.8 inches. Overall length is 7.25 inches. It's got a weight of 4.6 ounces, so it's not a heavy knife. It does operate very well. It looks excellent in your pocket as well. Can you imagine that much sticking out of your pocket with the colors and the sharp angles and all the lines? And it definitely looks good sticking out of my pocket. I'm a fan of that as well. There are some things that a little bit negative, as far as the actual overall fit and finish. It's not perfect, right? Because you can see here on the end of the blade that there's some milling lines and it's marked, and then there's this lump on the back of the actual tang here, the back of the spine of the blade. I'm not quite sure what that thing comes into. The actual centering is good, something you would expect nowadays. Anybody who's been around the knife world for a long time will remember back in the day when if you did actually want to carry a karambit, you didn't have nearly as many options as you do now. You had basically the Fox and the Emerson karambit. That was pretty much all that was out there, right? You didn't have a whole lot of options. There's so many different companies actually coming out with these things. I really like the difference in designs and the different materials that are being used. This thing actually has an S35VN blade, which has kind of become a market standard in the recent years, as well as you notice right there on the blade, it says USA Design China. So it's not lying to you, right? It's not saying designed in the USA. It's just straight up tells you it is designed in the USA, but it's manufactured in China. I definitely like that. I mean, there's a little bit of honesty there. Something else that's come across recently in a lot of these karambit designs is actually utilizing that backspacer, utilizing the backspacer to actually come out and create this ring, which offers you a lot of stability because you've got 2 points of contact here and another point of contact on the inside to actually give you any sort of stabilization. So if you're beating this thing into something, it's not going to break, it's not going to snap. You're not really at risk of losing those screws or snapping those screws off. I definitely think that's a good benefit for a karambit like this, because this is a fighting knife. This is not a utility knife, right? And I like the blade for exactly that example, right? As a fighting knife, because you notice how thin that thing gets. That is a extremely pointy tip. Let me bring up, this is a pointy tip too. That's going to go into material. It's going to work really well, but you can see just the amount of material, the amount of steel right up there actually at that tip. There's not a lot of material right up there at the tip, which again is, is a positive and a negative because you are running a little bit more of a risk of actually snapping the thing off. But at the same time, it's going to stick into material. It's going to sail into material very well, as well as the actual grind lines here. The way that they've done this supporting ridge coming down the actual front of the blade, with forming this choil up on the top, it doesn't actually meet the tip, right? Which you may think is kind of a negative, but at the same time, it reduces the amount of material right up there at that actual tip. And so you've got support all the way down to about that point there where it actually does taper off and meets the spine. And then you've got just the cutting edge, just that little bit of, it's like a full flat grind cutting edge, the first like millimeter of tip there, which is nice. That's very sharp. It's very pointy. That's going to sail into material. Bring up something else that has the same kind of design there. You can see there's just basically no material right up there at the tip on this Bayonet Blade Ultratech. So it just delivers the performance that you're really desiring and you're really looking for with the karambit. Because if you slash something with the karambit, you hit something really hard with it, all of that pressure, all of the cut is being started by that tip, right? Because a normal knife, if it has a belly, you slice something that has, bring this one back in, you slice something with a belly, that is what's actually performing. That's what's right there. The belly is actually what is starting the cut. Unless you're stabbing into something, the actual slash cut, that is what's going to be starting the cut. That's not the case with a hawkbill blade. This hawkbill blade, all of the starting and penetration and the actual cut itself is done right by that tip. And so that's a good thing. It's necessary to actually have that be extremely pointy when you're talking about something like this fighting defensive knife, right? I'm a fan of the way that this thing was overall designed, especially for $180, the materials that you're actually getting out of this thing here, if I can quit knocking those freaking cards around. With all of that said actually about the tip, you notice how it's a different color? Again, I don't know if that's going to come across as well on camera, but right up there at the tip, there's a little bit of discoloration. What that is, I'm pretty sure that's the actual heat treatment. It's the actual heat treatment that they gave to the blade. And so it does make me question whether or not this steel was properly heat treated enough to maintain its stability and strength through that actual kind of abuse, through that actual hard use, right? It does tell you that they did heat treat the blade. And so you've probably got a better stability up here, but it does make me worry about the fragileness, just a little bit of that actual tip. And as well, the wave feature, right? Because the wave has also kind of become synonymous with these karambits on the market nowadays. Most of them have it, unless you're talking about something like this. You know what I mean? This is what is this? CRKT Provoke? No. The hell is this thing? Yeah, CRKT Provoke. that thing, you don't actually need the wave feature. You have the ability to actually deploy the knife with it, with your thumb here, which is definitely a nice feature, but as well, this thing will wave out of your pocket if you angle it at just the right angle, which is an absolute requirement with this thing. If you don't get that wave feature sitting at the right angle, it just doesn't work nearly as well because the spine of this blade comes up so high. You've got so much of this actual lump here on the spine. When your pants are coming across, when you're actually pulling this thing out of your pants line, you can see that, right? My wave is not touching my hand, right? So if you're not actually engaging it, pulling this knife forward, actually pulling it forward into your pocket, turning it as you pull it out, it's not going to engage that wave. It's not going to actually pull that wave out and deploy the blade. And so that's a serious negative because when you get this thing out, if you pull it out, how do I open it now, right? Like you're going to do that when you're actually sitting here in a fight? No, that's not feasible, right? So you really are relying 100% on that wave feature actually functioning correctly when you're carrying this thing in your pocket in this specific orientation. And so having the wave feature just not quite tall enough in combination with the curvature of this blade, it doesn't work nearly as well as a lot of the other wave design karambits out there. That's a serious negative when it comes to actually using this thing as for self-defense. But if you get used to it, right? You only pull this thing out of your pocket in a certain manner. You get used to actually operating it and pulling it out. You train yourself. You get that muscle memory down. It's not a problem because it does work, right? It does work. It will snag your pants pocket. It will work. But at the same time, you do have to train, right? It's not nearly as intuitive as a lot of the other karambits that are on the market. And so it's kind of a negative and a positive, I guess. But the flipper itself, the actual flipper action does work very well. There's enough tension on the actual lock bar here to stall the blade out. See, it will move, but not very, well, sitting on ball bearings. I don't actually know what type of ball bearings they are. I haven't disassembled this thing. That video is going to be coming at a later date. I did have to switch the pocket clip over, like I mentioned, but I do like this pocket clip because it's not an extreme amount of tension. Because when you're using that wave feature, if it has too much pocket tension on the actual pocket clip, that can be a negative as well. And so having this 3D, this actual 3D milled titanium pocket clip allows you to just have a little bit of pressure actually squeezing it into your pocket, which isn't very good for attention, but at the same time, it does actually make deploying this thing out of your pocket, getting that wave feature out of your pocket, and actually having this knife into operation a little bit better. It is a little bit quicker and easier to actually do. And so I'm a fan of this thing. It's beautiful. I definitely like it. I bought it at Weeby Knives on Pier 39 in San Francisco. If you want to buy a knife from a knife guy, check out Weeby Knives. Hit them up on Instagram. I picked up several knives recently there that I plan on reviewing at some point near in the future. One of the things that just kind of messes with me, right? I don't know if it's going to come across perfectly, but the satin finish on this thing, because of the actual angles that are ground into this blade, the satin finish looks like it's running at different angles. But if you really pay attention and you follow one of these individual lines, it doesn't actually change angles. They are straight. The satin finish is properly ground. It does have they are straight lines, but it kind of messes with your eye for some reason. It's got like this optical illusion effect moving this thing around in the light that it seems like there's an angle change in the actual satin grind lines, but there's not on either side of the blade. Looks good. I definitely like that. Again, it's not perfectly finished. There's a little bit of texture here that needs to be done, but overall, for the price that you're going to be paying for this thing, Defcon Knives is definitely up their game in the last little bit, and I like it. I like the fact that they're manufacturing these things, designing them in the US, manufacturing them in China, meeting that actual price point. The 6AL4V titanium is very nice, but the actual name Defcon, right? Defcon. It's the Defcon. Defcon 1. Why didn't they call it Defcon 5? Defcon 1. Go to the actual automatic highest level of security threat for the U.S., right? Because that's what they're trying to imply by actually naming this company Defcon Knives. But, I digress. I can talk crap on that. I can talk crap on advertising for days. It's hilarious. I do seriously like this thing. Nailing it with another karambit design on the market. That's it. Y'all have a good one.